She's a woman. Historic. That's why we have the total disgrace of America's schools being shut. Who cares if science, data, facts from around the world show that schools can safely open? Who cares if children and families are suffering? The teacher unions are our donors. They must be obeyed. Unlike principled progressives like Bernie and AOC, the Biden-Harris gang aren't really interested in substance, the real-world impact of what they do. They care about the message they're sending, not the lives they're affecting. And that is part one of the huge political opportunity for the Republican Party right now. Relentlessly, remorselessly highlight the real-world effect of Biden's bosses, the woke left and government unions, on real Americans. But part two is vital as well. The media is trying to make out the GOP is divided. They want a Republican civil war. Why give them the satisfaction? On ideas, policy and substance, the Republican Party is united behind the new conservative populism pioneered by President Trump. It was an intellectual revolution as deep and lasting as the conservative revolution led by Goldwater, Buckley and Reagan over half a century ago. In economic policy, pro-business on tax and regulation, pro-worker on trade and immigration. In foreign policy, America first, China confronted, endless wars ended. And it worked. Peace deals in the Middle East that long evaded Trump's predecessors. Poverty down, inequality down, wage growth for the lowest paid, higher than for the rich throughout the Trump years. Record numbers in work, the lowest black and Hispanic unemployment rates in history. The border protected, trade deals renegotiated. Trump's conservative populism worked in political terms too. Republicans won the highest share of the non-white vote for 60 years, turning the GOP into a multiracial working class coalition. Gains in the House, gains at the state level, vital for the next round of redistricting. Who really thinks we should go back to the establishment economics, endless wars and sucking up to China? Certainly not Republican voters. They are overwhelmingly for Trump's new conservative populism. This is the future for the GOP. Positive and optimistic. As we say at the start of every show, positive populism, pro-worker, pro-family, pro-community, pro-America. So, build on Trump's foundations, then add new elements to add more people to the coalition. On the big issues that animate younger voters, show that we have the solutions, not the left. On race, it's decades of Democrat policies and Democrat leaders that inflicted poverty, inequality, and injustice on black Americans, and it's conservative ideas like school choice that can turn things around. On climate, it's not the Democrats' empty gestures and destructive ideological zealotry that will make progress, but conservative ideas, harnessing the power of markets and innovation. Matt Gaetz is here to talk about that later tonight. We should also build on Trump's foundations with conservative ideas to solve big long-term problems, like the collapse in family formation and family stability, and the growth of unaccountable centralized government power. More on that tonight too. But it's not just about policy. The GOP needs to fight for democracy itself, to fight the Democrats, Nancy Mandering, their brazen attempts to rig election rules for partisan gain. Less ballot integrity, more ballot harvesting. The GOP must unite to stop it. And perhaps above all, to win back the House, the Senate, and the White House, Republicans need Trump's fighting spirit, standing up for the decent working class Americans, failed and dismissed by condescending elites. Standing up for freedom of speech, even freedom of thought, against the menacing onslaught of woke supremacy. Put all that together, and it's a winning combination. Ideas and attitude that the vast majority of Republicans can enthusiastically get behind. That is the future of the GOP, positive populism. If you agree, follow us at Steve Hilton X and at NextRevFNC and share this message when we post it. Joining me now, two people who are very much part of the GOP's future, South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace and author of Firebrand, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. Matt, let's start with you. It seems to me that Republican voters out there want Republican politicians to attack the bad things Biden's doing, not each other. And as I've just laid out, there's plenty of material.
Well, of course, after the art of the deal comes the art of the comeback, and I believe that the future of the GOP is another candidacy for President Trump in 2024. I'm here in South Florida. I spent a couple hours with the 45th president yesterday, and he has a focus and a fighting spirit that is totally in line with the level of dedication and patriotism he had while he served as president of the United States. And he was talking absolutely like a candidate, but I have to push back and disagree with an element of your monologue, Steve. I don't see a Republican Party that is entirely united. You know, when you ask the question, who wants to go back to the forever wars and the bad trade deals and the caravans crashing across our borders, the answer is establishment Republicans. And there are a whole lot of them inside the 8 square miles of Washington, D.C. I think you're right. Throughout the country, America is united around the America First set of policy ideas. But for example, Liz Cheney remains the spokesperson for the House Republican Caucus. Your next guest, Nancy Mace, gave a stirring speech encouraging fellow Republicans to vote to keep Liz Cheney. So this isn't a personal critique of either of those folks, but it certainly does demonstrate that there is the America First pro-Trump wing of the party, and there is the establishment wing of the party, and the establishment wants their power back.
But to the points you just made, don't you think that actually, you know, what people really want to see out there, they want the policies implemented by Republicans, the kind of things that we all agree about, and I think that the vast majority of Republicans, all the polls show this, the voters want to see as well, and that's what they want the focus to be on, rather than the kind of infighting that I think they think, well, how's that going to help me?
Well, we have to know who we are to be worthy of a victory in 2022. All of history would seem to indicate that Republicans could take back the House of Representatives, but we have to be worthy of winning, and that means we have to stand for the things that matter to regular Americans. I agree, we should be fighting against the Biden administration having coalition U.S.-backed forces moving into Syria right now as we speak, but we literally have a spokesperson of the party who supports that stuff, who thinks that we ought to be in more wars, we ought to have lower wages for Americans to help corporate America by inviting illegals across our border. And, you know, there still are Republicans who think that every trade deal that benefits another country and advances U.S. soft power is somehow beneficial to us, even if it hollows out the towns and villages of real workers in our country. So I think we may have to go through a bit of a reformation in this church of a Republican Party before we can fully proselytize our message effectively.
Well, I certainly think that if it's a policy-focused debate, an ideas-focused debate, that is healthy and good, and that's what people want to see, and I think there's a tremendous amount of unity around what that outcome should be, as I repeat, from the actual Republican voters and members out there in the country. Congressman Gates, thanks so much for that. We'll leave it there for the moment. You're going to be back in a moment to talk about your vision of how the party can campaign on environmental issues, but now let's talk to South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Matt Gaetz just referenced you there, Congresswoman. I just want to reiterate what I just said, which is, it seems to me that on the policy matters, there's really not that much of a debate. President Trump did achieve a big turnaround in the orientation of the party towards the kind of working people that have been left behind for so long. You see that in the support coming back to the party. More polls out showing that the whole time. The Republican Party really is becoming this multiracial working class coalition, and the policies to support that and strengthen that, adding to them with policies, as I just said, that appeal more to younger voters and so on, that's a positive future that I think the vast majority of the party can get behind.
No, that's right, Steve, and I want to thank you for having me on this evening. The policies of the Trump administration, when we saw lower taxes, we saw greater freedom of opportunity and entrepreneurship, those things like entrepreneurship, being able to work for yourself, to have a dream, and to see that dream to fruition were policies embraced by the former president. And those are things that we should be embracing as a party, is talking to the millions of Americans who feel like their voices are not being heard right now, which is how Trump became so popular with millions of people across the country. And that's important that we take those ideas. We saw Operation Warp Speed. We saw vaccinations for COVID-19 made in 10 months rather than 10 years. Those are the things, policy-wise, that we have to get back to. And I respect Reagan's 11th commandment. I've never once gone after Representative Matt Gaetz or said anything negative. And I won't do that. I'm not going to take the bait tonight, and I don't know why he even wanted to go there. We have to follow the policies that make us freer and more prosperous and stop attacking one another if we want to win in 2 years and 4 years from now.
I'm going to have to see you, but I don't want to.
Yeah, and as I said, not just setting up that positive alternative, that's vital.
Like,
And I
lie,
think we've
right?
talked
Just lie
about what
about
the
it,
components
right?
of that could be, and there'll be more of that in our show tonight. But also holding the Biden regime accountable for what they're doing. You're already seeing the beginnings of an agenda there that's going to really hurt working Americans.
It's just like
Right, and it's troubling. We saw last week when we had the budget reconciliation process, all this talk about unity, and Democrats not once, at least on the 3 committees that I sat on, allowed a single Republican amendment to pass at that point. And so the talk about unity was just talk. There's not a two-way street there. And these are very serious issues that we have to grapple with, and we're in the minority, and it's going to be very challenging over the next 2 years.
And just one last thought I just wanted to get your view on, which is the point I mentioned at the end there, which is, yes, we can talk about policy, that's vital, but it's not just about policy, it's that attitude, particularly when people see the onslaught of this kind of the leftist woke agenda clamping down on free speech and free expression. I think people want to see the party as a whole really fight back against that strongly.
Right, and the problem with that is once you take our freedoms away, it's very hard to get it back. And we see that, I mean, just look at it right now with the left and the fencing and razor wire in D.C., but they won't fund a wall. You know, they're more interested in keeping open borders and keeping our schools open. And these are the things that we really have to talk about to help win back the heart, spirit, and minds of hardworking Americans all across the country right now.
Whatever, right?
Yeah, you put that very well. Strongly agree with that. Appreciate you coming on tonight, and see you soon, Congresswoman. That's the next thing.
Thank you.
You can't say I'm running, so you have to take that.
All right, coming up, how the GOP can fight back against one of the squad's top issues next.